Well, good afternoon, everybody. Dave Whitmarsh, Whitmarsh Consulting Group. We have on screen two Carolyn Peers. Aren't we lucky? So,
or really
one's live.
unlucky, maybe.
Right, one's left. So, I can't tell you how much over the last years I've enjoyed the conversations with Carolyn. Her technology seems very versatile. We've had conversations that, truthfully, if we could probably spend a whole day talking about some of the things and some of the ideas and some of the challenges. So I think that Carolyn has put something pretty simple together, and we're actually going to be doing a little research project, and this is going to hopefully be the start of the kickoff on it. So without making your head too big, I will turn it over to Carolyn and see what we have. I guess I should make you a co-host in case you need to share screens, right?
Yes, I would love
There
to
you
do
are.
that.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Wonderful. So thank you very much, David, for the introduction, and likewise on the conversations. My conversations with you are always very interesting, and hopefully other people will find this interesting too. A lot of what I'm hoping to talk about today really came from almost 20 years working in HR, learning human performance, and really listening to what people wanted that at the time we couldn't do. And as technology has evolved, fortunately, it's become, I won't say completely possible, but it's getting better and better. We're getting closer and closer. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. Hopefully you can see that now.
Yep, all looking good.
So a lot of the technology that we developed, we wanted to look at how feasible it was to use in the workplace and what sort of results we would get as a result of introducing something, a new way of looking at employee feedback and connecting it directly to immediate action. So I'm sure most people are familiar with the concept of the employee engagement survey. And I know I was one of those people especially when I was working at ADP, we would run employee engagement surveys. I would have to kind of harangue all of the different division leaders to get their leaders to, poke and prod their employees to take it. And we would, have this monitor going along. Well, we're at 25%, we're at 50%, we're at 75%. And then we'd extend the deadline. And then, we'd inch forward and really hammer down the reasons why it was important to be a part of the process. And eventually we'd have to close, even with the extended dates, we'd have to close it out. And then we would wait, usually a couple of weeks at least, before there was any kind of reports or data that we could get. And eventually, after a few weeks, they would give the leadership the sort of high-level summary of the data, how people have responded, where there were concerns, and then we'd have to have a meeting to discuss, how we want to present the data out to the entire organization. And then we'd have another meeting to actually roll out the results to the entire organization. And then we'd have another meeting within our individual teams to talk about the results. And then we'd have another meeting to go through what we might want to do for an action plan. And then we'd have another meeting to actually implement the action plan. And then we'd have another meeting to see our progress against you get the idea, right? There's just it was meeting after meeting after meeting. And not that meetings are necessarily a bad thing, but here at Humaxa, what we wanted to do was look at this concept of when the feedback is given and when it becomes actionable. And if you take those 2 points in time and basically turn it into 0, so that all data and feedback is gathered live, gathered anonymously, but immediately actionable from the employee standpoint. And then at the same time, it's gathering all this data on the back end so that the leadership of the organization, the leadership within HR can take a look at it and can act on it as well. So whatever issues come up, they're really being addressed in 2 directions, both from empowering the employee to take action and giving really thoughtful, insightful data to the HR leadership or the leadership of the organization, so that together they're acting on it in 2 different directions. That was really what we wanted to look at. How does that immediacy change the quality of the data and the quality of the feedback itself? So rather than just pontificating about what the answers might be, we decided, let's run a study. Let's take a look. Let's try to see if we can get some empirical data around what actually happens when you compare side by side, apples to apples in this capacity. So I'm obviously here representing Humaxa. I just thought it might be interesting to look at so the background of our company and our team. As I mentioned, it was really born out of these more than 20 years of experience in the HR learning and performance industry. Our mission is to ensure rewarding workforce experiences result in tangible business outcomes. Our vision is to facilitate work environments where people can be the best versions of themselves all over the world. And our values are act with trust and transparency, strive for accountability, be ready for anything, and most importantly, people matter. So our executive team, we have a very small but diverse and broad executive team. As I mentioned, I got my start at a small HR tech startup called Pro Business. I was an early employee there. We grew the company and ended up being acquired by ADP. I then moved over to ADP, running one of their learning and performance organizations for national accounts, so for their largest clients. And I left ADP in 2017 to found Humaxa with my co-founder, Guillermo Borges, who has a very impressive background in AI. He was in the middle of doing a PhD in natural language processing, AI, and machine learning, which he left in order to focus on Humaxa, although I told him not to do that. He did it anyway. And
You
then
cut him short of his PhD? Well, how cruel are you?
Trust me, when he called, he didn't tell anybody that he was going to leave. And not even me, not anybody in his family, nobody. And then one day out of the blue, he did it and then called me and said, "Hey, Carolyn, guess what? I'm working on Humaxa full time now." And I said, "What?" My immediate brain was, "What have I done?" But you know, you are the person you are because of the decisions you make in life. So evidently that's what he wanted to do. And now all these years later, he's still with us. So I guess in his mind, maybe he made the right decision. I told him to just wait, join when you're done. But I honestly think he kind of had it with the program. So I don't know. But anyway, so as we gradually grew, we were joined by Guilherme, Charles, and Jennifer, and also Gary. So I feel very fortunate to have been blessed by this wonderful team. Could never have gotten to where we are without them. So as I alluded to early on, there's a lot of different ways to gather employee feedback. The concept of gathering employee feedback actually goes back probably 70, 50, 60, 70 years. If you think back in the 1950s, where there was really a focus, an initial focus from an HR standpoint. Of course, then it was probably called personnel, looking at human capital and how much value can really be derived out of the simultaneously the most expensive and the most valuable asset a company has, meaning their human capital. Of course, back then, nothing was electronic. So it was probably more like, like a piece of paper that you filled out and with pencil. And unless you could read somebody's handwriting or identify somebody's handwriting, anonymity was guaranteed unless somebody happened to put their name down on the survey. So the concept has been around for quite a while. Of course, it's evolved over time. Now, all types of employee feedback surveys are done electronically, and the cadence of them has kind of evolved over time. Some organizations do it once a year, some do it once a quarter, some do it once every 2 years, some have, even weekly, with a pulse survey concept. So it's kind of evolved over time, but some of, the underlying principle of trying to hear directly from the workforce in what's working well, what's not working well, what do we need to do to get better? Who better to talk about it than the people who are actually doing the work?
And I should say that's one of the things that I've committed to trying to help Carolyn with this, is to run this out to it, really from the sake of betterment, right? If automation through AI can help eliminate or enhance and make things more efficient, then truthfully, I think that's a good cause and a good study. So, I'm on board with trying to find that. I am part of I do have the best practice networks, and if I couldn't figure out some best practices for folks, I don't think I'd be doing myself any justice, right? So that's why I'm here, why I'm involved, I should say.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's hopeful that there's so much innovation going and people looking at what's the right cadence. How do we make sure that people trust that surveys actually are anonymous? That's something that I hear, the concept of trust. I hear a lot about that, just from the trenches, workers saying, hey, yeah, we get those surveys. I don't fill them out because I don't think they're actually anonymous, and I don't want to, come back and bite me in the butt. I don't want to get in trouble. There's, I hear this kind of thing all the time. Or just, how do we ensure that people know that it actually is anonymous? Like on our side, we have between 10 and 11,000 people on the platform today. And if people didn't trust that it could give and have it not come back and bite them, we'd be nowhere. And trust is something that is built over time. The first time you ever interact with the Humaxa platform, for example, you probably don't trust it if you're a worker, or maybe who's had a bad experience with something coming back and biting them. It's completely understandable. And me talking about how there is not a single person on my team who has access to this data. We would have to spend probably a month even trying to write a program that could get that data. We just don't have access to it, and that's on purpose. We have no way. The only time I know anything about a client's data is when they look at it and talk about it with me, but it's still, you can't tell who has said what. It won't even display the data until there's at least 8 people talking about the same topic. But yeah, it's trust. It's something that's built over time.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we struggled with, I think for a long time at ProBusiness, at ADP, I heard our clients struggle with it at the same time, is, how can we just get better quality data? I regularly heard from different divisions that would come back and say, oh yeah, well, people are filling it out, but they're just filling it out with random answers. They're just going down the line and marking all ones or all fives or all threes just to get HR off their back. And then of course, when it came to the open fields where they could, just put their own words down, we really did not see a lot of people. Maybe 1 in 20 would actually write something. And then when they did write something, usually it was something very kind of curt and not a lot of rich, authentic feeling that was put into it. It was more like, yeah, everything's fine. Or, yeah, I don't like these surveys. People actually wrote that a lot. So how can we get better quality data? So our idea was take the traditional employee engagement survey concept and take a group of individual employees, give half of them the traditional employee engagement survey, and give half of them access to the Humaxa platform. And we just picked 300 to 400 because it's a good number when you have at least 1,000 employees, that it's going to give you statistically significant data. But of course, that's not hard coded. And if an organization only has 300 or 400 people, of course, it could be lower than that. Take the group, divide it in half randomly, so there's an equal distribution amongst all the sort of typical demographic variables that are out there, and see what happens. Pick 12 commonly asked employee engagement questions and use the same 12 questions for each group. Run it for about 90 days so that everybody has a chance to respond, and then look at the data. If there really is going to be a difference in the quality of the data, the richness, the authenticity, the actionability of it, this would show definitively that the concept works. So I said, hey, let's prove it. So how would this work? So the group one, they get the traditional employee survey. This is just a made up question. Meaningful work, the professional development that I receive at work is meeting my needs. Very typical Likert scale, obviously it could be on a scale from 1 to 5. In this example, we used, ineffective, fair, good, excellent, exceptional. So the same exact question, the professional development that I receive at work is meeting my needs. What does that look like with group 2? So group 2, this is the AI assistant we've affectionately named Max, or MaxFred in this example. So you may notice this is Slack. So the Humaxa platform integrates directly with Slack, directly with Microsoft Teams. This is just the Slack example. So Max reaches out to an employee and says, hey there, quick question from your local bot. Do you think the professional development that you receive at work is meeting your needs? And I answer, well, it's pretty good, but I really wish I could get better at public speaking. So Max is interpreting that as, it's pretty good, but there's something negative going on here. And so Max recognizes that and says, hey, I could try to arrange a mentoring activity so that you could get some of the professional development that you're looking for. What do you say? If I say accept, and now I've switched over to Microsoft Teams to show you what this would look like in Teams, then Max could go out and actually find a mentor who's already raised their hand and said, I'm willing to mentor people on public speaking. Here's another example. Max chats with someone and talks about innovation. Says, wow, I really love finding better ways of doing things at work. Bots are like that, What about you? Do you feel like you're encouraged to find better ways of doing things at work? I say yes. And then Max says, hey, I'm glad you feel this way. Would you like to elaborate on why it makes you feel positive? And in this case, I say, well, I feel like we're always trying to solicit new and better ways of doing things. I just wish that I could find more people to collaborate with regarding my innovative ideas. Because I'm sure there's other people out there that feel the same way I do, right? So Max recognizes that and says, awesome, it's such a good feeling when you discover a new great way to do something. Would you like to join a group discussion about innovation in the workplace to find even more ways to do things? Sure, I'll accept that. And then Max brings us together with the other people who have responded in a similar way and kicks off the conversation. This is an innovation channel. I wish everybody a good time and a fruitful discussions. So then I jump in, hey, I'd really like to hear, how are groups incentivizing people to find new and better ways of doing things? And Max continues to facilitate the conversation. Another person jumps in and says, hey, we have this contest we run each month where people propose new ideas. They can be upvoted. Max facilitates these contests right here in Teams. It's easy to set up. Want me to show you? Gosh, I didn't even know that could be done. So again, it's the whole concept that we're trying to test out is the feedback is immediately acted upon in an automated way, at the same time that leadership or leadership within HR is getting all of this data and can look at all the trends and see what's up, see what's happening. So what does that look like from the admin or the leadership perspective? So how do you predict and uncover these potential issues? And now we've sort of switched from innovation. We started off with professional development, then there was innovation. Now we're talking about diversity. So this is really looking at how is data tracking over time? In the conversations about diversity, how do people feel about the organization's efforts towards making people from diverse backgrounds feel valued and feel included? So all the conversations that are going on with Max, and they can all be happening simultaneously, of course, being tracked over time, it's possible to see, how the data is trending, and of course, alert the leadership within HR if there's something that looks like it's going the wrong direction. The data takes a big dive, or maybe there's somebody that just really puts some very strongly worded feedback in there. It will alert you immediately to what's going on. Again, looking at it from the admin perspective, it will show you what is being said, what Max's feedback that he's getting through the conversations. In this case, someone says, I feel sad and frustrated. I wish management would take diversity seriously instead of just lip service, giving it lip service. And somebody else says, actually, I think we do a really good job of this. So you can see what is being said. Of course, you can't see who is saying it, but you can chat one-on-one anonymously with the person who has said that. So in this case, I might want to say, hey, I'm sorry you're feeling sad and frustrated. How could we do a better job of taking diversity more seriously, or making it more apparent that we are taking it seriously and that we need more help in kind of getting the word out and getting people involved in the process. So that could be a live anonymous conversation that goes on, so that, again, it's not just empowering the employee, but it's giving a way to get into the root cause of why people feel the way that they do, beyond just answering a bot in a channel. So we get this question a lot, is how can we really prove the ROI? And a lot of times, having worked in HR or an operational function, often we are asked, how do you prove the value of this? And so the way that we try to make it simple for people is to take a baseline of the data. So when the application is first implemented, take a baseline, and then hopefully the data gets better, or it gets worse, but hopefully the data gets better. You can see over time how much money is being saved based on turnover, the reduction in absenteeism, and just the improvement in the overall scores themselves, the engagement scores.
You actually have this publicly available somewhere, I think, too, don't you? If you wanted to factor in or see how your
Yes,
organization is.
it doesn't look exactly like this. We do give it away because we think it's a really good way to prove the value of improving scores. I mean, scores are just a number, but if they can translate into an actual dollar figure, then it just makes it a lot easier to justify the cost, which is, of course, what we see. So this is what it looks like when it's built into the system. And of course, it's automated. But yeah, I mean, it's just an Excel spreadsheet. And by the way, this is not novel data. We looked at several different studies that were done in the industry and kind of took an average of all of them together and then build that into the calculation. So it's really just kind of a almost like the Rotten Tomatoes of movie critics, where you get an overall score based on all these different movie critics, except in this case, it's industry experts looking at the ROI of improving engagement scores. This concept of spend on current programs is something, again, that sort of justifies and substantiates the reason why engagement is important. And of course, improvement in overall scores is representative. So this is just looking at what the typical organization spends on programs that are felt to be improving overall engagement. So obviously benefits, flexible hours, vacation time, work from home options. There's a ton of money that goes into these. One of the things that we look at is what are the things that are actually really important to people? So, I mean, I hate to pick on the ping pong table, but, you know, there was a period of time where if an organization had a ping pong table, it was like, that was the thing to have and to make sure that everybody's actually fully engaged and feels like the company cares about them. Of course, that's really silly. And I think even at the time, people knew it, but, you know, who knows, without having that feedback loop going on, it's really tough to know what people actually appreciate and where there's actually a lot of ROI in where you invest in certain programs. Without that data, you know, it's hard to know. On-site gym is actually pretty low on the list. Who knew? So we've been very fortunate. The clients that we've been working with have been giving us good feedback about just how valuable adding Max, the AI assistant from Humaxa, has been, especially in the world of remote or semi-remote culture. It gets harder and harder to really have a good sense of what's happening at scale, especially when people are far apart. And what we typically see is within the first 3 months, between month one and month two, there's generally a big jump, but over the course of the first 3 months of implementing our software, we typically see about a 33% improvement in commitment to organizational success based on the data that we see.
Over that short of a period, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it still is only based on about 10 to 11,000 people on the, you know, in using the platform. But yeah, that's generally about how long it sees. And then, yeah, and then, you know, I mean, the curve, what we see so far anyway, the curve kind of flattens out, but it also prevents a return to previous levels. So, and as new things come up, then, you know, of course you see little blips along the way. I can give a really concrete example of something that really happened. We had a client who rolled out an emerging leaders program, and they're a really good company. They definitely value their their workforce and the human capital that they have. And they put this program in place because they felt so strongly that it was going to help. Unfortunately, I think they had a lot of things going on and they just didn't publicize it very well. And the process to become a part of the Emerging Leader program wasn't transparent enough. And so they rolled it out. And then as people started being accepted into their Emerging Leader program, there was this whole other part of the population that was like, hey, wait a second, how come I'm not there? How do I get in this? I didn't even know about it. And they were very, going back to the whole trust issue, I think we proved with that group anyway that they trust that their replies were anonymous, because it really kind of blew up. People were very upset that they didn't understand the system. And so what they did was they asked us to have the assistant, Max, direct people to their site. I think it was a SharePoint site that had all the information about how to apply for the Emerging Leaders program, what kind of prerequisites they were, what kind of training was needed, and so forth. It had everything laid out. So it completely closed that gap between perception of this program and how it's possible to apply and to get into it. So,
That's cool.
Yeah. So I'm not sure the best way to, but I would love to hear questions, David, if it's possible to
well,
answer.
If there are any questions, we can certainly put them in the chat, right? And you can certainly put them in the chat and we can answer them. So I don't see any here, but one of the things, and we do have some time left. So Carolyn, if you're open with it, and I'll certainly edit this video, going back 15 seconds or so, but maybe for some of the folks that are on, we can talk about some of the things and some of the bizarre and fun things that you've sort of stumbled across, and some of the instances that you've solved, right? And so if and again, I'm open to editing, right? So don't worry about that. But I know one of our first conversations, and there's questions, if there are any questions on any aspect, please jump in. But one of our first conversations, you addressed something that I haven't seen done from AI, and that was you used AI and effectively replaced two performance management type related tools, right? And so one was I can't remember. I can remember one was Culture Amp, and they were using a couple different tools. Do you recall that conversation at all?
Well, I'm certainly familiar with Culture Amp. I'm not sure exactly how it pertains to what we talked about, David. Maybe you can
Right.
fill me in. I'm sorry. I had to use that brain cell for something else, I think.
So I know that you've had some pretty wild instances where people have come to you and said, hey, can do this, and can we do this? And effectively you
Sure.
helped do an organization fulfill what they deemed as performance management, right?
Got it. Okay. So I think, yeah. So one of the things the way that we look at performance, and I mean, to be clear, we are not a performance management system.
Oh, absolutely. Right.
But I do see that Max is a way to connect performance feedback and get really rich, actionable data into a performance management system. And one of the ways that we kind of help do that is by looking at crowdsourced goals and ideas. And I think that might have been what we talked about, David, if memory serves. So, if you think about, let's say, a consumer electronics company, and that have come up with some really good innovations with maybe a smartwatch that tracks your vital signs and your sleep patterns and your heart rate and maybe some other health and wellness things on this. And the concept that we wanted to do is, good ideas come from everywhere, every level within an organization. And whether you're the CEO of the company or you're the person who's sweeping the floors, you may have an idea that could change the course of the company, because great ideas come from everyone, especially if you're using the device. And so what we did is we kind of made a way for goals and ideas to be crowdsourced and almost in a Reddit-like fashion, like get upvoted, like, hey, that person came up with a really good idea. Oh, that person's working on something really similar. Maybe we could collaborate. Max can facilitate those conversations and pull in other people who might be able to give feedback about this goal or about this idea and bring visibility literally to anyone within the system, anybody. You don't have to be the CEO to create all the goals. Some of the goals, if they're good goals, they're valid goals, will naturally bubble up to the top of the queue, and then get the backing they need, get resources, get funded, whatever it is. I mean, if it's a really good idea, it can come from anywhere in the organization. That's what our thesis is. And so, yeah, we built the technology to help make that happen.
That's cool. And so, could you do me a favor? I think right now you're sharing your screen. I'll certainly make sure everybody that's on here got your deck. Yeah, that's better. I can see it better. So what are some of the obstacles that you're seeing with companies bringing anything AI related in from a human capital standpoint? Like what are pushbacks that some folks are going to have to deal with or come across?
Sure. I mean, AI is a new technology, and I honestly think sometimes people have watched too many scary movies with AI that takes over the world and does horrible, nefarious things. But yeah, I mean, just people sometimes are just, it's always natural to be afraid of something that is not understood well. And in our case, the system, I mean, it's a closed system. There is nothing that this AI can or would do that isn't already known. And of course, that was by design. And I think it makes it so that it feels safer. It feels more understood. I had a conversation not that long ago with someone who said, hey, Carolyn, is your assistant Max going to go tell all my people to quit their job and go get a job somewhere else? And I thought, well, it wouldn't be very valuable if that's what it's going to do. I mean, of course it's not. But the fact that the question got answered, I think, really highlights the fact that it's not well understood. The technology is not well understood. And anything that's new and not well understood can also be, cause fear. And in some cases, AI has been used for nefarious reasons. I mean, it can, feel creepy to some people. I mean, the personality that we gave to Max is very, kind of, like he tells bad jokes. They're not very funny. They're very self-deprecating, but, it's also very disarming is the way we kind of, made it that way. But, that only helps so much in sort of alleviating the potential fear of what is this going to do? Well, oh my gosh, the worst thing it could do is make a recommendation that's not really relevant. Like, oh, I wanted to be mentored in public speaking, but maybe it's going to try to get me a mentor in executive presence. It's really not like nothing catastrophic is going to happen if Max recommends a mentor.
Yeah, it's not like it's selling your house and changing your ID or anything, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so like at an entry level though, and with if I was to say generically, if you had 1,000 people in your company just using it for, some basics, right?
Yeah.
Why has every company not adopted it? Like, the ROI is there for some basics to be covered, right? In a sense, it's almost like payroll, right? The whole industry is almost outsourced. Very few companies do their own payroll, right?
Yep.
And there's certain HR functions that and certain functions that just should be done through AI, right?
Right.
And do you feel that way, or do you think that like, is it ready to be fully adopted, or do you think that it's still a learning curve for a lot of people?
Well, I mean, if you look at the functionality that exists today, a lot of it we got from our clients. Our clients wanted this, they were very vocal about, and still are, and we've used that to kind of drive the product roadmap of what most people are wanting. And I think that will continue. It'll just continue to get better and better, but it's a noisy market. And I think even the most basic HRIS systems have usually some super basic way to do surveys, for example. So it could be in the minds of like, oh, well, I don't need this. I've got survey, surveys come with, fill in the blank HRIS. Well, sure, that's true. But this is definitely not a survey platform. But yeah, I mean, it's a very noisy, fragmented market. And I think it's hard even just to get the message out there and across to what's possible.
Yeah. So without, and sorry, I've done this all day today. I've put people on the spot. So without without sharing a company name or anything, what's an instance that, you just talked about your customers leading the change. What's an instance that one of your customers did that was like, wow, that's really cool. Good thinking. Congratulations, right? That you've rolled out or helped them with?
I think the anonymous two-way live conversations, that was an idea from a client. They wanted that. And they were actually have worked with us really closely with sharing what they're getting out of having that function in particular. For example, there was a couple of weeks ago that they had talked about somebody who had talked to Max and had basically said, I'm lonely. I don't have any friends. I hope somebody is listening to me at work. Like, it was a very heartfelt, kind of sad conversation. And, we talked about that. And I think that this past year, just the whole COVID situation, and people being, even some cases joining a company remotely, and the only kind of interaction that they have is perhaps, the people that they have at work. And then, not really having an opportunity to interact outside of that. At scale, ideally having a way to predict something like that going terribly wrong for somebody that's just really suffering from isolation, loneliness, and hey, is anybody even listening to me? That company was on it like that. And with a live, they got someone from HR, live conversation, nobody had to be identified. And, they talked about all kinds of like, here's a link to this. So, hey, here's a link to this. Here's a link to this. These are all these things that are going on, that kind of intervened. And I mean, it's, you only hear about when things really go badly. But you don't hear about the things that go well, right? When maybe we prevented somebody from really, kind of having a mental health breakdown. I don't know. We'll never know, probably. But it sure feels like we're doing the right things to be able to prevent awful things from happening. So
that's cool. That's cool. And yeah. So what other questions might have happened? And by the way, people can still chat if they have any questions. But I've seen I've seen some really weird, and when I say weird, in my world, right? Maybe not in yours, right? But I've seen some instances. Um, I think I was listening to a podcast the other week, and I can't recall who it was. If it was Mark Cuban or Elon Musk, but they were talking about there's a there's a chat bot. You can rent a chatbot friend, right?
Uh-huh.
And so basically you sign up and you get a friend and you tell them all about you, and over the period of time, that these people talk to them, and it's really crazy, because they have like logs of conversations that go on for hours, right? So it just goes to show that the intelligence around, oh, hang on, I got a 4-year-old monster that's ticked because his iPad's not working. Um, okay, 1 second, please. So it's really amazing how the technology has come and how people are adapting to it. And I think it's just going to be a matter of time before it's just more and more impacted into right across the organizations and how we work, right?
Mhm.
And like everything, over 50, guys are probably going to be the last to adopt, but the millennials and the Gen Xers are, this is just perfect for them, right?
Well, I think it's really important too to note that, at least in our case, and I think in a lot of cases, like, we are not replacing humans. It's a platform that can do something that humans could never do. I mean, even just from a time perspective, if you think about, okay, we're going to take one person, their job is going to be to go around and talk to each individual employee and just kind of see how things are going, and get them to open up and talk about where their struggles. Like, first of all, just from a logistics standpoint, it'd be near impossible to do that at scale unless you have like a
Right,
5-person company. But
right,
second of all, like, people don't just open up and share where they're struggling. It's hard to say that to a person. Like, hey, I'm really, I'm suffering. I'm suffering from not being able to perform on the job. Like, oh, I'm not worried about losing my job. I'm just going to tell you all these things that I'm struggling with. Like, it just doesn't happen like that.
right,
So
right.
being able to do that in an anonymous way and get immediate help is one way to solve it. And there's, obviously there's many, many other ways to solve that too. So it's not about replacing people. It's about empowering people to do what they're good at, which is, okay, now we know the data. We know that, like, this group is, has an opportunity here. The data is going down, and then intervene as a person. So you don't have to do oh, let me go talk to each individual person and somehow make it so they don't know who I am and I don't know who they are. Like, it's just, it's a technology that is not replacing people. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah. Well, and sometimes I think what happens is it's also servicing people the way they want to be serviced, right? So if you look at I'm sure, I'm in Canada, you're in California, um, but we have Walmart or self checkouts, right? Is that a big thing? It's been a year or so since
line
I've
is
been down.
shorter.
Right, right. So that there's a lot of people that resist. If I wanted to pay for somebody to bag my groceries, I don't work here, and you see a lot of those memes. But then you talk to some people and they go, those are great. I don't have to talk to anybody and I can get in and out super quick. I love it, right? So
Yeah.
I can really see, a hybrid of some of these things working. And really, if we're focusing on engagement or productivity, I think it's going to be up to companies to deliver things in methods and approaches that map the way they want to be talked to, right?
Sure. Or it's midnight and we talk about flexible work, especially when people are working remotely, maybe you want to spend the afternoon at, your son or daughter's baseball game. or something.
mhm.
And then you're getting it back online and working, it's midnight and that's just how you work, right? But who's going to be around at midnight to go talk? Oh, well, Max is always there 24/7, you know,
Right, right.
again, again, it's not being able to just replace what a person can do, but do augment what a person can do and meet them where they want to be, as you put it, kind of catering to the need of each individual.
Yeah, perfect.
So.
Okay. Well, thanks for filling up our time. Like as I said, you're so fascinating. I just loved speaking with you. So everybody, you are eventually going to be informed about our survey that we'd really like to put out to try to get some tangible results based off our real data. And I'm looking forward to rolling that out. And then secondly, I encourage you to connect with Carolyn and have an AI conversation and see if you guys can knock off some business issues.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, David. I appreciate it.
All right, and I have to get on to the next meeting, so we'll take care of that. And thank you. And everybody, you'll get contact information. The archive will be up shortly and all that good stuff. Okay.
Wonderful.
Thank you. We'll
Thanks
talk
again.
soon.
Thank you.
Bye now.